Good morning, everyone, and welcome. On behalf of the Illinois Department of Innovation and Technology's Office of Supplier Diversity and the office, thank you for joining us for the kickoff of our brand new educational series, Leveraging Diversity in Technology Procurement. This series is designed to provide vendors and partners with practical insights and tools to successfully navigate the state's procurement process while advancing diversity, equity, and inclusion in technology contracting. Today's session, Understanding Vendor Disclosures, will give you a clear and actionable overview of the key disclosure requirements for IT vendors working with the state of Illinois, from conflict of interest statements and political contributions reporting to IDHR registration, the Illinois Procurement Gateway, and common pitfalls to avoid. Now, I'm excited to introduce our presenter. Leading today's session is Chris Brinkmeyer, Agency Procurement Officer at DoIT. Chris brings a wealth of experience in state procurement and compliance and plays a critical role in ensuring transparency, fairness, and efficiency in IT contracting. Please join me in welcoming Chris Brinkmeyer.
Yep. Rich, I have to say that's the best introduction I've ever had.
Yeah, floor is yours, sir. Have a good time.
So as Reggie said, we're going to cover vendor disclosures today, Secretary of State, BOE, IDHR registrations. This is super exciting stuff. I may have stretched that just a little bit. There's not a whole lot exciting about vendor disclosures, but they are a very important piece of state procurement. They are required for every solicitation that's over $100,000. So understanding the pitfalls of them and the errors that we see on a normal basis is important. If you want to kick off this next slide, Val, we'll go through there. So when we're talking state vendor disclosures, there's a couple different ones. So if you go out to the CPO-GS website, or if you notice any solicitation bid that you're going to see that you have interest in, you're going to see two different files attached. You're going to see active IPG registered vendor disclosures attached, and you're going to see vendor disclosures attached. They have different requirements. They got different things to fill out. To fill out the active IPG registered vendor disclosures, you must be registered with the CPO's office's Illinois Procurement Gateway at the submission. If you fill those out and you are not registered or have an active registration at the time of submission, that would get you disqualified from the bid. So we want to make sure we do not do that. We'll get the slideshow out. There's a quick link there on how to register in IPG. But the most important part about the active IPG registered vendor disclosures it's only 3 pages long. Anyone that's done business with the state knows we love our paperwork. So that's a good way to get out of doing a lot of paperwork. If we're doing vendor disclosures, this is if you do not have a registration with the Illinois Procurement Gateway system. It's a 22-page long document. So if you're looking at doing multiple bids with the state throughout the year, whether it's with DoIT or any other agency, registering for IPG will save you a lot of time. If you're not registered for IPG, now we got to fill out the long document. We'll start with the long document because this is where you're going to have issues at the time of solicitations. If you want to click through, Val, we'll get there. So vendor disclosures is a 22-page long document. Some of it's pretty self-explanatory. Don't usually see a whole lot of issues. So page 1 of this document that's showing up on the screen, the way I have this separated, hopefully it's helpful to you in the future. Left side is an actual screenshot of the document of the sections you need to fill out. Right side is just a quick overview. I'll try not to read off the slides because I hate sitting through slideshows where people are doing that. So page 1 of vendor disclosures. Page 1's simple, right? What's the vendor's name? This is the vendor that plans on bidding on the solicitation. Phone number, street address of the vendor bidding on the solicitation. I say this because if you're doing business ads and maybe you have 2 separate headquarters, it needs to be the one that's actually going to be the contract holder at the end of the day. Email address, city, state, zip code, and who your contact is, right? That one's pretty self-explanatory. Don't usually see issues here. I'm going to advance to page 2 for me, please. So the next page of vendor disclosures we got to fill out. Also fairly self-explanatory. Official name of your business, who you're doing business as, your headquarters, are you a subsidiary, your billing address. Pretty straightforward. One to make sure you look at the name of your chief executive officer. Could be your president, could be your CEO. This is used for Board of Elections registration. Board of Elections is required by the Illinois Procurement Code. If you want to have some light reading to go to sleep, I put the reference procurement code there. But what this states is that any ownership, the business itself, the CEO, or anyone with equivalent power to a CEO, so chairman of the board, president, owner, they all have to be registered as an affiliate in Board of Elections. Board of Elections checks to see if there was any political contributions that were not allowed while holding a state contract given during the last 2 years. So that's a separate registration. There's some instructions for that later on, but that's what that registration checks. Checks to make sure everyone affiliated with the business is listed and make sure that you don't have any prohibited political contributions. Those contributions include the governor and the lieutenant governor. If you're contributing to a political party or a state board trustee or school district, none of that matters. It is specifically for the governor and the lieutenant governor. Let's go on to the next page. And if you guys have questions, please stop me if you want clarification. I don't want to just be talking to the screen the whole time if there's a question.
We do have a question, Chris. If wasn't for sure if you want to do this at the end, or do you want to do it periodically throughout the presentation? Because we do have a question out there right now.
Let's do it through the presentation. That way it's
okay.
It's the relevant point that they have question.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, is there a portal online where we can see our company's vendor disclosure and contact information?
There is not a portal. This is a document that you have to submit with each one of your bids. The IPG that I mentioned at the beginning of the slideshow is a portal. It requires a yearly registration. So it would have all this information for you if you do that registration. And then you won't have to fill out this document that I'm going over right now multiple times.
Okay, we'll go ahead. Hey, Reggie, if you can copy that link and put that in the chat for that portal, that would be great. And so they just said that they want to ensure we're not nearing expiration and that our contact information is current. And that's why they need that information.
Yep, and then so that would most likely be the IPG you're looking for, Illinois Procurement Gateway. So that is something to make sure you keep update. It expires on a yearly basis, so you do have to renew it every year and update that information if need be.
Okay, that's perfect. Okay, that's the only one we had pending.
Awesome. All right, so 1.6 through 1.10, again, fairly explanatory, self-explanatory. Your company website address, if you have one. If you don't have one, not the end of the world. Type of organization. This does play a role later on. This should match what your W-9 looks like. It should match what you fill out on the taxpayer identification page, which we'll go over later on. So if you're a corporation, a sole proprietorship, LLC, whatever it may be, we need to make sure it's matching what we have later on. So this is where you fill that out. Length and time in business, again, you should fill it in. Doesn't have to be down to the day, second, minute, just the number. That's a general idea of how long you've been in business. Annual sales for offers most recently completed fiscal year. Again, this is filled out for a couple reasons. One, for tracking purposes. Two, to make sure that if you're bidding as maybe a small business, to see if you exceeded that threshold. So it's used for verification purposes. Again, don't have to be down to the dollar and cent. It can be an estimation. The last one, section 1.10, this one ties into the Illinois Department of Human Rights registration. So we're asking for the number of full-time employees on average for the most recent fiscal year. So the IDHR Act comes under a couple of places. They have their own section of legislation. It also comes under the Illinois Administrative Code, which is a clarification of the procurement code. So this requires any agency or any vendor wanting to do business with the state to register for IDHR if you have more than 15 employees. It's a fairly quick, straightforward registration. You can usually be done within a day. So if you are planning on to bid on something, you see it come out. This one shouldn't hold you up, but as in anything, the earlier you get it done. This one is a 5-year registration. So if you get it done now and don't decide to bid on something for 3 years, you still have it and don't have to worry about doing it. Then me to the next page. 111, this is used for tracking purposes. This is where you would check the box if you meet any of those categories. We use this for several things. So if you check, for instance, anything that's on this current page, we may be asking you if you are interested in registering for the BEP program, and then you would reach out. We could get you connected with Reggie and Alice's group. They could help you walk through that registration. You would reach out to CEI to do the actual registration. We don't have the power to register you on our own, but we can most certainly explain the registration to you and help you out with that. Same with veterans. Veterans would be to sign up for the VBP registration. So there's a portion of state contracting over $100,000 that is set aside for either BEP registered vendors or VBP registered vendors. This is figured out through a calculation, and I think this probably you'll get a more in-depth explanation, and I'll show a webinar later down the road. But this is figured out by NIGP code, which is the state's way of classifying procurements. And the way it's figured out is number of vendors registered under either BEP and VBP versus number of vendors registered in the bid buy system, which is the state's e-procurement system as a whole. It just gives you a quick percentage, not a real complicated equation to get there. If you have 100 vendors registered to do business in an NIGP code that a solicitation is in, have 3 vendors that are BEP registered, there's only one NIGP code used, you'd have a 3% goal. I'm sure Reggie and Alice will cover that more in depth and give you an in-depth look at that in one of the later webinars, but just a quick reason of why that's there. Advance eval. And then slideshow doesn't cover everything that's in there. I skipped to the parts you got to fill out. There's reading in between these. Make sure you're familiar with what you're signing. Section 3. This section covers the requirement to register for the Secretary of State. Secretary of State is what gives you the authority to conduct business in Illinois. There's a couple separate different registrations. I gave you the overall link in the slideshow to the business services portal for Secretary of State. There's registrations as corporations. There's covers registration for an LLP. There's a different kind of registration if you happen to be a farm owner, if you're sole proprietorship. So that webpage will give you exactly what you need, and it'll walk you through what registration you need. Most companies that we see are corporations or limited liability corporations. Those are the same registration. You must be in good standing with the Secretary of State to do business with the state. So you got yearly reporting that's required to them. If you don't get that done on time, they may put your registration on hold. So just make sure that's up to date before you bid. It'll save you a lot of headaches down the road, and it'll stop the award. The requirement by legislation is that you are in good standing by contract execution. So if you were to win a contract, it would hold your contract up for how long it took you to get back into good standing. Jump down to the next one. All right. This section is going to cover Board of Elections. We briefly talked about who is required to register for Board of Elections. It's the business, it's the CEO or equivalent. There's a link to the registration page to register Board of Elections. Section 4.30 is the next section you need to fill out. It is a simple checkbox. Yes, I'm registered with the Board of Elections. No, I'm not required to register with the Board of Elections. More often than not, the only time that would ever be the case is if you're a 501c3. Any other vendor that's for profit would need to register for Board of Elections if you are bidding on a contract or have cumulative contracts that are over $50,000. So vendor disclosures aren't required unless the solicitation over $100,000. So if you're filling out these disclosures, therefore you would be required to have a Board of Elections registration. Jump down to the next one. The next one's a simple certification. This certification says that you do not have any business with Iran that's applicable to the Procurement Code Section 50-36. It's a simple checkbox. If no, check it and move on. If yes, we need you to disclose what operations you have with the country of Iran. This is required by legislation, so not too difficult here. If you do have business operations, it doesn't necessarily disqualify you from bidding. It would have to go through a separate verification and approval process to continue forward with the contract. Jump to the next one. And then we get into the section where we actually see the most issues from vendors in general. This is the financial disclosure section. So financial disclosures, they're part of the vendor disclosures. If you're registered with IPG, you've already done these, and these are kept up on a yearly basis through the IPG system. This is the long form vendor disclosure. So if you're not registered with IPG, we have to go through this entire section and fill it out. Every single time you're going to have a financial disclosure for the vendor bidding. So in that scenario, you check the top box in the left-hand side picture here saying you're the vendor. Project name is whatever the solicitation is called in the bid buy system, which is the state's e-procurement system. Illinois Procurement Bulletin number, that's the bid number that you're bidding on. Contract number you don't have to fill in. Vendor name is the vendor name filling out the disclosures. If you are doing business as another vendor name, please put that in there. This set of disclosures, the disclosing entity. The disclosing entity is the person filling this set of disclosures out. So for the very first set of disclosures for the vendor, this would be the vendor's name again. And then this is the next ones where we start seeing issues on disclosures generally. The disclosing entity's parent entity. A parent entity is defined very specifically in Illinois Procurement Code. A parent entity is if you are owned 100% by another business. That doesn't, so if you're owned 99.9% by another business, you don't have a parent entity. It's only if you meet the 100% threshold. So that is when you would put the parent entity in that section. If you have two businesses that own you and they're 75% and 25%, they don't need disclosed. They will be disclosed further down, but we won't require disclosures for them. So we'll get a little closer into that further down. Subcontractor, that section's only filled in if this is the subcontractor filling out the disclosures. We'll talk about who all is required for disclosures here in a second. Then instrument of ownership, this should match what you put on page 1 as your corporation type. So you'll see page 1 kind of coincides with this for that checkbox. You want to go down to the next page. I talked through that already, so we can go ahead and go down to the next page here too. All right, so then we get to step 1 of the vendor disclosures. And this is where you have to disclose what your ownership really looks like, right? So there's several options. There's options 1 through 6. Option 1 is if you're a publicly traded entity. This means you have stocks on the stock market. If this is the case, there's 2 things for you to do here. You can fill out every owner that has a share in excess of 5% or 60% of the governor's and or income, or more often than not, you're just gonna use your 10K, which is option 1B. Your 10K can be a link to the SEC website. It can be a link to your personal business's website, or you can attach a PDF copy. All 3 methods work. If you're a privately held entity, which is option 2 with more than 100 shares, it's very similar to option 1, right? You can attach a list of everyone that has more than 5% ownership or 60% of the governor's income. Or you can use option A, or you can fill out the federal 10K again. So I don't think I've ever seen anyone actually submit a list of every single person that owns them if they're a publicly traded company. Most of the time we're going to get a 10K. Option 3, this is a lot of the companies that we do business with or fall in option 3. Option 3 is your privately held entity, not a sole proprietorship. So that means you have 1, 2, or 1, 2, 3, 4 owners. So if you're owned by another company, 100%, you'd still be option 3. If you're owned by 2 companies, option 3. If you're owned by 2 individuals, option 3. If you're owned by a company and an individual, option 3. So 9 times out of 10, you're going to be option 3 unless you're publicly traded. Option 3 has the same qualifying things on disclosures. You'd have to disclose any ownership or distributed income shares in excess of the 5% or greater than 60% of the governor's salary, which is $142,740. Option 4 is if you're a foreign entity. You would just need to attach a copy of your SEC Form 20F or 40F, and then you'd move on to step 3. Or just like in option 1 and 2, you could disclose every person that has more than a 5% share or more than 60% of the governor's salary. Option 5 is only if you are a 501c3 not-for-profit entity. Option 6 is if you are sole proprietorship, you are 100% owned by a person, not a business. By a person. Let's skip down to the next page, Val. So next step, so step 2. So in step 1A, 2A, 2B, 3A, all on the first page here, this is the table where you'd fill out the people with the percentage of ownerships. So table X, they are all persons that exceed the 5% ownership or businesses, and the value exceeds 142,000. This is direct ownership. So anyone that has direct ownership of that entity that is filling out this disclosure. If there's 100% ownership, so let's say vendor A is owned 100% by vendor B, that would need disclosed here, and that would require a set of disclosures for vendor B. If vendor B is 100% owned by vendor C, all 3 vendors are going to have to submit disclosures to be eligible for an award. And that goes all the way until there is no longer 100% ownership. It could be 99.9% ownership after that. As soon as it doesn't have 100% ownership, we don't need to set our disclosures anymore. As long as there is 100% ownership, we need disclosures for every step in that cog. And this is direct ownership. Table Y usually just matches table X. It's distributive income. It has the same thresholds, 5%, $142,740 for it to need to be filled out. Check now. We don't have any questions up till this point. So this is the section we see the most errors.
Yeah, no questions, but I think we might have an incorrect link out there for the SOS. So we'll copy the right link out there for you before the end of today's session, but no questions yet.
All right, jump on down to the next page then. The next page, there's 2 questions that every vendor must answer at the top. This just says I've disclosed everybody that holds ownership greater than 5% or that $142,740. And the next question says I disclosed everyone that has distributive income that matches those thresholds. Option B is only filled out if you're a not-for-profit. This is where we would need a list of who the board of directors are. It can be either filled out in the table, it can be filled out in the attachment. Go on to the next one. All right, step 4, another place that we see, sorry, step 3. No, by step 3, here we go. Back one page. There you go. Step 3, this is another place we see errors. This is asking if you have a lobbyist or agent. The caveat is it's only if the lobbyist or agent is working on the solicitation you're bidding on. So you may have one on staff. If they didn't do anything for the solicitation you're bidding on, they do not need to be disclosed here. If they did anything for the current solicitation, then this is when we need disclosed. And then you would fill out the second part of this where you describe all costs, fees, compensation to that lobbyist or agent. This does not get you disqualified from holding a contract, but it does go through a secondary approval process. I'm going to go on to step 4. Step 4. So step 4, make sure we read closely. This is only filled out for each person disclosed in step 2, option A. So this is not filled out for entities. If you read the questions, we will see why. The bright red text that says click here to enter text, it must be filled out for every person that's in step 2, option A. So if there are 5 people disclosed in step 2, option A, each of them need to have this filled out. If the answers are the same for all of them, you can list all 5 names here. If you have one person that has to answer differently than everybody else, that person would need a separate one. So if the answer is no for every individual, you could fill out all 5 names here and check no. The reason this is only for people, if you read the questions, they are specific to a person. Do you hold or are you the spouse of a minor child? Have you or your spouse? Obviously, businesses cannot have spouses. So these are only applicable to the people disclosed. Similarly, step 5 on the next page. Jump down. Same thing. Is asking specific questions about a person. So you can put all entities on one page, or if you have separate answers, submit multiple of these pages with a thing. Very similar to the last one, this is asking questions about the people. Have you in the previous 3 years had state employment? Has your spouse, father, mother, son, or daughter had state employment? So again, marking yes to one of these questions does not get you disqualified from holding a contract. It requires the state to get a secondary approval from the Procurement Policy Board saying that they don't see a conflict of interest in awarding a contract to this vendor. There is very specific sections of the procurement code that doesn't allow some things. One being, if you are a state employee, you cannot hold a state contract if you are the owner of a business. So that's what this section is checking for. If you answer no to all of them, no worries, and we can move on down to the next step. Step 6, that wasn't on there. That was just where you'd explain any of those relationships. So step 7. Now, step 7, if you reads very differently than steps 4 and 5. Step 7 says it must be completed for each person or entity disclosed in step 2. And so that means every person listed in step 2 and any businesses listed in step 2 need to be disclosed here. Again, there's the red text there. That's where you would fill in the name of the person or the entities. Again, if all the answers are the same, you can put everybody in one page. If they're separate answers, we would need separate documents. These questions are asking if there's debarment contracting with any government entity. Have you had professional license discipline? Has your company or people had any bankruptcies? Has there been any adverse civil judgments and administrative findings? Have you have any felony convictions? Marking yes to these again does not get you disbarred from having a contract. That's why at the next bottom of this section, there's a thing for you to explain any of those things. So say you're a large corporation, multinational corporation, and you had judgments against you. It's up to the agency to decide if we can move forward based on what those judgments are. So we would need you to explain what those are in the next box. We'll move on down to the next one. Step 8. So step 8 is disclosing of any current or pending contracts. So if you have any contracts with the state or any pending bids out there that are waiting to be awarded, this is where you would disclose those. The main reason that this section is used is to see if the value exceeds $50,000, but if you're filling these out, it most certainly does, which would require the State Board of Elections as registration. Step 9, pretty straightforward. Fill out the disclosure, sign it, who is disclosing it. Do you have the authority to disclose on behalf of your company? Who's the disclosing entity? Jump on down to the next one. And the very last page on vendor disclosures is the taxpayer identification numbers. So it would either, all these don't need filled in, it would either be the name or the business name or the social security number or EIN number. This page is used for a couple different things. First off, we use it to make sure that you are registered with Illinois' Office of the Comptroller, so you may be paid for your contract. It's used to see if you owe the state any money for any state agency. So if we run your FEIN number and you have a debt to the state, that debt would have to be paid before you can enter into a contract with the state. And lastly, this bottom legal status check should match what you filled out on page 2. Also, what you fill out at the top of the financial disclosures. And this is if you're an individual, sole proprietorship, a LLC, a corporation. And this would need to match with whatever's on your W-9 as well. So your W-9 should match this. This should match what we have filed at the comptroller. That way you can get paid. If there's a change in this document, or maybe you were a revenue entity previously, and now you are a disregarded entity because your corporation changed structure, it would need to be filled out for who is going to receive the revenue. So I got a question here. I'll grab the question that I have in the chat.
You
Is
have
what
one. What agency or group evaluates conflicts of interest?
Very good question. Conflicts of interest are evaluated by multiple agencies. The agency you are bidding with is the first agency. We go through your conflict of interest. If we don't see an issue, we pass it on to the CPO's office. The state purchasing officer that's in charge of the specific agency then reviews it, and they give their recommendation. Finally, the procurement policy board gives the final recommendation. They review it, and if they see no conflict, we can move forward. If they want follow-up information, there may be questions asked at that point until we get to a final verdict. So 3 agencies review conflicts of interest to make sure that there is not an interest or conflict in doing business with the state. Jump on down to the next one. Before I get into this one, so we just finished vendor disclosures with financial disclosures. I briefly mentioned this in the top, but I want to reiterate. If you are wholly owned by another entity, so vendor A is wholly owned by vendor B, they do not need to fill out the entire vendor disclosure. Vendor B only needs to fill out the financial disclosure part, the bottom section. And that we need one of those from every single vendor until there's no longer 100% ownership in the chain. So vendor A is owned by vendor B, which is owned by vendor C, but then C is owned by D. D is owned by F and G jointly. We would need disclosures all the way through vendor D. That is one piece that's missed. I know it could get complicated sometimes. I've seen up to 16 sets of disclosures for one solicitation. Hopefully that's not you, but it does happen. It is required. We cannot move forward until we have every single one of those. So now let's get to the easy document. IPG active registered vendor disclosures. So what this document means is you have an IPG active registration. This is a yearly registration as mentioned before. What this registration entails is you answered all the questions from the previous document, the vendor disclosure document. It is a database that keeps all those answers. You recertify every year to make sure the answers haven't changed. That database requires the parent disclosures if there's parents. So having these IPG active registered vendor disclosures, you didn't get to skip out on anything. You only had to fill it out once, and now you maintain it on a yearly basis. So all the same information is required. It's just filled out in the IPG database versus on a new document every single time you bid. So this one's, like I said, it's a lot more straightforward. Bid by reference number. What's the bid number you're bidding on? Procurement contract number you wouldn't have yet, so you do not need to fill that in. But number 1, what is your IPG vendor registration number? And what's the expiration date? When we receive these as an agency, the bid closes, we're going to go out and verify that you had an active disclosure IPG registered vendor account at the time of bid. If you were active at the time of bid, it has then expired maybe 3 weeks after the bid opened. We would allow you to cure it. If you bid and filled this out and did not have an active registration, you will be made non-responsive. So only use this document if you are sure you're going to have an active registration all the way through the bid opening date. want to jump down to the next page here. So this is a quick screenshot of what the IPG looks like and the numbers that you need. So top section of IPG, this is the site ran by the CPO's office. There's your supplier name. The second thing here is the piece that you need. This is your IPG vendor number. This is what you put out on that document that we were just looking at. And then your expiration date is the fifth field down. And then important status. That means you have an active registration. These things are what let you know that you can fill out the active IPG registered vendor disclosures. General information here. This is dummy information for anyone wondering. This is a corporation we made up to have something to show. Second page, again, has your business name. This is where your federal employer identification number would go. So this should match whatever you're filling out on the FEIN page, along with your corporate headquarters. So as you can see, the same information is on these this IPG registration as that's on those disclosures that are the long document. Jump on to the next page. And I just did a quick thing. So just to show you that this is what the IPG looks like as you're registering. So all these fields are the same fields that had you not had an IPG registration that you would need to fill out on that 22-page document. So again, IPG is a way around from filling that document out every single time. Jump on down to the next one. Not really need to cover there. So next part of the IPG registered vendor disclosures, section 2. Section 2 certifies that you did not help the state write the solicitation. This should be marked yes, otherwise you cannot bid. If you help the state write a solicitation, you're not eligible to bid. Question 3, we just looked at this. This is the same as the one in the vendor disclosures. This is your disclosure of a lobbyist or an agent. Again, this is only if the lobbyist or the agent worked on this solicitation. If they did not work on the solicitation, you do not need to disclose them. Jump on down to the next one. 4 should look similar to pending contracts. The reason these are on this short disclosure document is this isn't something that can be captured in IPG. You could have 5 new contracts by the time you registered. So same with the disclosure of the agent or lobbyist. You may have had a lobbyist work on this procurement, but not a different one. So that's why these live in this document as well. So again, you fill out whatever current contracts you have, current bids, proposals you have out. Question 5. Question 5 is new. This has only been on the disclosures for about 1 week. So all the question 5 is there's no checkbox or nothing. You're agreeing to this by signing. This is saying that you did not use forced labor if you're providing the state for any apparel. So it's a new law that just took effect. So it has been added to the certification documents. Jump on down to the next one. Question 6, not shown on the screen, but you sign and date the disclosure. Guess what? You're done with the IPG disclosures, all except for the FEIN page at this point. So as you can see, much quicker, much faster to fill out. So I'll leave the floor open for questions. If you have questions over anything of how any of those disclosures need to look, what you need to disclose, parent entities, which is usually the biggest hang up. I know this isn't real fun stuff, but these are absolutely required at the time you submit for any solicitation, and they can a very easy way to get you not valid for the bid. So filling them out is extremely important, and filling them out correctly is important. If you fill out the correct disclosure for the solicitation, so say you fill out the vendor disclosures, a long document, as long as it's filled out and tried, it is curable. If you make mistakes, we will work with you fixing those mistakes. But you cannot fill out the wrong document. If you submit that IPG active vendor disclosures and you do not have an IPG registration, that gets you disqualified right away. So at this point, I'll open up the floor for questions on disclosure specifically.
Okay. We do have someone that has raised their hand, so I'm going to go ahead and unmute you so that you can ask your question verbally. Manju, hold on. Okay, your mic is open.
So I have a question about the bid number. You mentioned that we are supposed to put the bid number, and I am wondering where exactly we need to put that bid number, and if we are just trying to renew our IPG. So,
Gotcha. So the bid number could be in one of two places. So if you see the second box to fill in on this page is the Illinois Procurement Bulletin number. That is the bid number out of bid buy. So when you get notification in bid buy that there's a solicitation out there, it gives you a number, usually starting with whatever fiscal year the state's on. So right now it would say 26 dash, it'll tell you what agency it is. So for us, it'll say 448 DoIT. And then it'll have a couple more dashes, and the last 5 numbers will be, it'll be in the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sequence. It'll be a 5 number. So it'll be B-1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, or 4, 5, 7, 8, 9, 5, whatever that may be. That's the bid number that goes in this box. It is the unique identifier for each solicitation. There'll never be a duplicate bid number. It is always separate and distinct. And if you're bidding on multiple bids, you need to fill out the bid number for each one. So you would have to have a new set of documents for every bid you fill out.
okay, so this disclosure is required each time we are trying to fill a bid, correct?
This is the long disclosure. So this one, if you are not registered with IPG, would be required every time you're filling a bid. You have to fill out either the long document or the short document every single time. The long document, if you're not registered in IPG, short document that we covered the second half, that's only 3 pages if you are registered in IPG.
I see. Okay, got it. Thank you. So that comes along with the bid, the short document, if you're already registered with IPG.
Yeah, both of these documents will be posted in the bid by solicitation that you'll see. So you just would have to fill out the appropriate one.
Okay, got it.
And and when you go to bid, when you actually go to put your quote in, the system won't let you move forward unless you submit a document. We can't force you to submit the right one because we don't know which one you are. But it does have a warning that you have to fill out one or the other and submit a document for that file.
Got it. Okay. Thank you so much, Chris. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris, for sharing your expertise in breaking down the ins and outs of vendor disclosures in such a clear way. Thank you to everyone who joined us today for the kickoff of our Leveraging Diversity in Technology Procurement educational series. We hope you found today's session, Understanding Vendors Disclosures, both informative and useful as you navigate your work with the state of Illinois. Before we close, I'm excited to share that in October, we'll be hosting office hours and an open session where you can bring your questions about state procurement, certifications, and upcoming opportunities. Stay tuned for more information. We'll be sharing those details soon. This is just the beginning. We look forward to bringing you more sessions in this series. We will continue exploring ways to strengthen compliance, increase opportunities, and leverage diversity in technology procurement. On behalf of the Illinois Department of Innovation and Technology, Office of Supplier Diversity, and the IT Procurement Office, thank you again for your time and participation. Have a powerful and productive day. Thanks, everybody.